In this Elden Ring Nightreign video, we're going to be bringing you a tier list for the 10 Nightfarers currently in the game. This is going to be a bit different than the tier list we did before. The first tier list we did was mostly focused on how beginner-friendly each class was, as well as how effective it was. But as time has passed and new metas have become a thing, as patches to the game have happened, there's quite a lot to unpack in terms of how good each class actually is at the moment. So first up, we'll take a look at the C tier characters in Elden Ring Nightreign. I don't think there are actually any characters that are just outright bad. The balancing of the game is pretty decent in my opinion. So we don't have any characters in the D tier column. And in fact, we start out at C tier with Revenant. Revenant is not a bad Nightfarer, but is a victim of bad RNG and lack of options in FP regeneration. Her main flaws aren't even related to her class itself, but just the game's systems. Firstly, as an incantation-focused class, all the Revenant can do is find incantations to spam against the end-of-day Night Lord. If she can't find a good one, she quickly becomes the most useless class in the game. With a ridiculous amount of absolutely garbage incantations in Nightreign, the percentage pool of actually good spells on seals is very low, and the opportunities to actually get a seal are also very low. With intelligence casters, the map has rises which drop staves and spellcasting items, forts for more staves, and in general, higher drop chance for staves on boss drops. For incantations, all you get are white seals from huts and great churches, or maybe the occasional blue one. This system makes it a massive pain to actually find any spells worthwhile, and forces your teammates to go to great churches in hopes that you can find something actually useful. In terms of FP regeneration, incantations with good damage like Dragon Fire, Dragon Maw, Giant's Flame Take Thee, and others typically have massive FP costs, which the Revenant just can't support without more external support from Starlight Shards or Relics. But there is a positive in that the new Balancer's Relic has the first ever passive FP regeneration buff. However, even with this buff, it's still incredibly difficult to manage FP on the spellcasting class, because a little FP over time isn't that useful in the middle of a raging boss fight. In terms of her actual abilities themselves, they're actually pretty good. The summons get owned in Deep of Night though, but are still a valid distraction in both Deep of Night and the base game. And her ultimate is a pretty good team res plus invincibility that can save a lot of runs when used properly. Overall, there's nothing wrong with Revenant's actual kit, it's just the game's systems itself which holds the Revenant back. Even if she had an FP regeneration skill like the Recluse, the seals in this game are just a pain to play around with because you typically don't get a good one. Next on our list is Guardian. The Guardian is a strange class which falls somewhere between a support tank and absolutely useless. I've seen a lot of people complain on our videos about Guardians who show up and contribute absolutely nothing to the team, as well as people saying that Guardians are a lifesaver for the clutch moments when you need them. I personally love playing Guardian. It's one of my favorite Nightfarers in the game. I have a Guardian shirt and I will definitely main him sometimes, but there's no denying that he is not as effective as many other characters out there. And even if you want to debate whether he's C tier or B tier, he's certainly not A tier or S tier at most of the time when played by most players. In my experience, it's been a little bit of both though, with Guardian can feel incredibly useless if you can't get the right weapon or setup, and just end up as a turtle for a full fight, but at the same time his abilities are just great for team play, and when played well, that can sometimes overcome some of that. His basic ability staggers trash mobs in a big AoE, which no other character really has, and his ultimate, like Revenant, can actually be a game changer in dire situations. With the right build and setup, he can be pretty good at survivability in Deep of Night, but it's really a question of can you deal any damage at all to enemies, and would it be easier to have another character that can? Okay, with the C tier out of the way, next we'll move to B tier Nightfarers, and first up is Executor. Executor is in the B tier because this list is purely based on the effectiveness of a character in team play, and while Executor is likely the absolute best class in the game for solo play, he's honestly somewhat mediocre in what he brings to the team when compared to other characters if you're playing multiplayer. His basic skill is Suncatcher, his parry sword, which can literally deflect anything except grabs, and this can make him a fantastic pseudo-tank for taking aggro while other teammates unload spells or attack behind the boss's back. It also deals a good amount of stance damage with enough parries, so you'll be able to stagger bosses more quickly. However, this is where the usefulness of Suncatcher starts and frankly ends. While he has this sword out, he can't sprint or attack with any weapon he's acquired in the run without having to awkwardly swap back to it. You can learn attack patterns to use the unsheath and sheath parry frames to more smoothly come in and out of combat, but all in all, this ability is simply not as useful as an S tier class ability. His ultimate, however, does come in very handy in a variety of situations. The instant heal can save you from getting down, and the damage output plus stagger for the full duration of the ult is decent. The Roar is also S tier for staggering a large amount of trash mobs and reviving teammates from a distance. You can even use it as a mobility ult for covering huge distances in the map if you ever fall behind your team, so there's a ton of use you can get out of it. In terms of his playstyle, the status effect playstyle works very well as long as you get the right weapons. If you can get a Rivers of Blood, Serpent Bone Blade, or upgrade a good starting weapon, it will go a long way in terms of damage for Night Lord fights. However, there are a few bosses that are immune to most status effects, and he's not nearly as effective in those cases. Overall, the main reason he's B is simply because his parry skill doesn't contribute to the team as much as it should. With competition like Restage, Analyze, Cocktail, or Trance, it really doesn't hold a candle to those skills. Next for the B tier is Raider. Raider is a fantastic Nightfarer on the surface with an S in strength and a specialty in caveman bonk builds. However, with the release of the Deep of Night, his main gimmick of being a damage sponge with crazy DPS was mostly retired, and now with the Undertaker, there's another choice for a strength character, and there wasn't on the game launch. His main skill, Retaliate, is a Haymaker Punch, which gives him a huge damage negation buff and topples smaller enemies. The main gimmick of tanking damage to empower the punch and stagger enemies relies on you making a genuine mistake in order to get the value of this skill, which obviously isn't great in Deep of Night, but in general is not that good compared to other classes. The Undertaker can get a free 2 additional ults without having to tank damage, and it deals more damage and staggers. His ultimate, however, is a pretty good part of his kit as it buffs everyone in a large radius for 15% attack damage for 30 seconds, or 60 seconds with the relic buff, as well as staggers and deals some impact damage. In terms of utility, he can also use the Pillar as high ground to dodge many enemy attacks, great for casters in the team. One small inconvenience with this ultimate, though, can be that new raiders may just drop totems on top of bosses, which can break line of sight for teammates and act more like a hindrance, but that's something that's easy to learn. Overall, I think Raider used to be S tier, but with the Deep of Night completely killing his skill's purpose and the Undertaker being a new fantastic strength character, this character has suffered quite a bit since the launch of Nightreign. Next, we're going to take a look at the A characters in Nightreign. These are characters that are almost S tier. Some of them are like just on the brink of being S tier, in my opinion. You could even make an argument for them. But let's talk about Scholar first. The strength of the Scholar class is that he really doesn't have to rely on equipment to contribute a lot to his team. If some decent relics, he can not only apply damage negation buffs to his allies, but he can also debuff how much damage the boss does while buffing himself for his stamina. And also, again, with relics, he can increase the attack power of his team as well. None of this relies on any equipment in the game, so he can reliably contribute to his team. Additionally, he can use items more effectively than any character, and if he uses a relic that applies those effects to other teammates, he can not only buff those teammates for damage negation or attack damage, but he can also add a max 30% HP to them, which is a staggering amount, particularly in the Deep of Night game mode. His ultimate skill is also absolutely deadly at clearing large packs of enemies, which can make your day 1 and day 2s go much more quickly. Like if you can go into a camp and just trigger this, it has insane range, and if you have the relic that deals damage over time, you can just wipe out camps from basically like the center of them in about 5 or 10 seconds, which is crazy. Having S in Arcane also makes it so he can apply status effects very effectively to enemies and bosses, and that should definitely be part of his kit as well. But he has two main issues, in my opinion. First of all is that when enemies are resistant to status effects, he's much less useful. Some of the, like, Halaster is not a boss that you can apply status effects to, and the, new Dreglord boss is also one that kind of resists his stat effects a lot. So he is not as effective in some cases when relying on status effects. Additionally, he has a dodge that's quite bad. It looks like Recluse's dodge at first glance, but it goes a fraction of the distance. It's even shorter than a standard dodge roll in Elden Ring in my estimation. So you can't really hang toe-to-toe with enemies in melee range. He kind of runs in, applies a status effect, backs away, and goes back to buffing and debuffing enemies. And that's kind of the style of play you'll play with him when playing that. And not everyone will appreciate that style of play. A lot of players aren't going to want to sit there and use their Analyze over and over and over, taking them out of like what is more action-paced combat compared to some other characters. And I think this is one of the reasons that I have him at A tier instead of S tier, is because his status effects are not useful against some bosses, and his style of play is simply a lot to do, and I don't think most scholars are getting the most out of him. Next up at A tier, we have Wilder. Wilder is one of those characters that's like somewhere between S and A tier. If there was a tier that existed, that's where I'd put him. He's certainly better than Scholar in my opinion, and he's very, very solid, but he's not as good as some other S tier characters. Wilder is a solid, well-rounded character that can basically use any melee weapon in the game. He's very balanced with his stat spread, and he's incredibly good in Deep of Night because of his Sixth Sense passive, because you tend to get one-shotted the deeper you go in the depths, and this can prevent him from dying many, many times in a given run, which makes it so his team doesn't have to res you, which is really, really strong. His normal abilities aren't going to make enormous impact on the fight like Iron Eye's Mark or Duchess's Restage, but he's a solid A tier when it comes to those because of the versatility of them. For instance, like using his grappling hook in the Tricephalos encounter can help him like stay up on the boss as it's mobile around, and that can be very, very useful. He can also use it to traverse the map more quickly when he needs to, and his ultimate gives him eye phrase for a very, very long time, allowing him to use it through many deadly attacks and still live. And it also does an incredible amount of stance damage and damage compared to any of the other ultimates in the game. So he has probably one of the most reliably consistent ultimates out there. It can revive teammates up to 2 pips on the wheel. That's pretty strong. So really his claim to fame is Sixth Sense and his ultimate, but beyond that, there's nothing really that makes him quite as good as the S tier in my opinion. He doesn't contribute quite as much as those S tier characters, but he's like right on the cusp. So moving on to the S tier characters, these are not any specific order. I just kind of wrote them the way I wrote them. So don't think that, you know, the first one I cover is the best. But the first on our list is Recluse. And Recluse is just simply one of the best DPS in the game when you get her Stars of Ruin and Moon spells. If you can get these spells on her, she can shell out more reliable damage than just about any character in the game, if not more than any character in the game. That's the number one reason we have her on here, but there are other reasons as well. Nextly, learning the cocktails that she can do is really complex, but also incredibly rewarding with abilities like a bunch of free FP for a short duration, or fire-breathing healing, invincibility iceberg, auto parry, and much more. She has a lot of different things she can do, and if you can master those, she has a very high skill ceiling, then you can do a lot of things that a lot of recluses out there wouldn't typically do. She also has built-in FP regen, though she doesn't rely on it as much as she does Starlight Shards usually. Most recluses that I play with will stack FP with relics that allow them to gain a higher FP bar, dump all their FP into a boss, and then just replenish it at a Site of Grace or in boss fights, pop Starlight Shards so they can keep DPS up. But nonetheless, in the early goings on day 1, she usually needs this skill in order to be able to keep casting, and no other character in the game can do that. Really the biggest drawback to Recluse, in my opinion, and it's one that could put her in A tier depending on how you view it, is that she may not get one of those great spells, Stars of Ruin or one of the Moon spells, or maybe not Ranker Call or Ancient Death Ranker. And if she doesn't get one of those spells, then she is much less effective than she is when she gets one of them. So there is a little bit of RNG involved, and the mileage you get out of Recluse might be a little bit different depending on her spells. Next up is the new class, Undertaker. And before, when we were talking about her in our preview video, we said she was somewhat uninspired. But now that we know the nuances within the kit there, and there's a lot more to it than the ability descriptions say, she's definitely in the S-class category. Her trance skill is just such a good universal buff that any melee class would die for, with enhanced dodge, damage negation, increased poise, increased attack power, and the buffed version of it is fantastic for defense against attacks you don't know or in dire situations. With her ultimate, she can interrupt a boss out of basically any attack or action up to 3 times if other party members use their ultimate, and up to 9 times in a full team if you have 3 Undertakers. Being able to get back her ultimate after a perfect dodged grab is also great when paired with the enhanced trance. Her weapon specialty is also great, since there are quite a few possible strength faith weapons that you can get which absolutely slaughter enemies, such as Marika's Hammer, Blasphemous Blade, Godslayer's Greatsword with its Queen's Black Flame, and more. The successive attack bonus to attack power and trance and possible scholar buffs make her a powerhouse and by far the best melee character at the moment. She basically has everything you would want built into her kit: damage negation, poise, attack power, repeatable staggers, auto dodging for 15 seconds, and decent spellcasting alternatives. A lot of people were saying that this makes Raider somewhat redundant, and to an extent I agree. She's a bit behind on the strength scaling compared to Raider though, but fully makes up for it with her overall kit, which provides much more value than Raider currently does. Next on our list is Duchess. On launch, we rated this character pretty harshly since it wasn't beginner friendly at all, but now with enough time passed, Duchess simply existing is already fantastic for the team, with her abilities providing tons of utility. Restage is one of, if not the best skills in the game, since it simply just restarts a portion of all damage and status buildup over 10 seconds or so. It's simply just a great source of damage, especially if you use it after someone else's does like an ultimate or a very high damage spell. Her invisibility is similarly fantastic utility for its flexibility. You can use it in a variety of situations, such as fighting a beastly brigade, needing to res teammates, or simply getting boss aggro off you, or approaching a boss before they even know your team is there so you can get right on top of them before they even have a chance to react. Lastly, the build potential for this class has mostly two directions to go in: status effects or spellcasting. Spellcasting, as with the Recluse, is the highest form of DPS you can get in the game. The Duchess doesn't have the free FP regen or cocktails that the Recluse offers, but only has 9 less intelligence and 2 less mind than the Recluse at max level, so you still deal good damage as a Spellblade type character that can cast some spells. And last on our S tier list but not least is Iron Eye, my personal favorite class and the one I probably played the most of in Nightreign. Iron Eye gets huge points for not only being one of the most consistent, well-rounded Nightfarers, but he's also one of the easiest Nightfarers to pick up and learn in the game. The main point as to why this character is so good mainly just comes from the fact that he can deal consistent damage over time with R1 spam while far away from enemies and bosses, and use his charged R2 attacks to deal with larger bosses and enemies very, very quickly. Similar to the Duchess, he also gets a ton of value from simply existing, as he can consistently apply marks to targets that both make enemies take increased damage, but also explode for huge damage and stagger. The iframes on the ability is also ridiculous, making it a great way to both dodge enemies and debuff them at the same time. He also provides good utility through his passive, which increases item drop rates from enemies for the entire run for all characters in his party, and is a good source of status effect buildup since he can consistently range down targets with his B and Arcane, scaling to quickly trigger Rot, Poison, Frostbite, etc. if he can find the right bow or if you build for it at the beginning of the game. There's also quite a bit of versatility within Iron Eye's kit, which most people tend to ignore. With his stat spread, it is viable to use melee weapons alongside bows, or even a full melee build using daggers, claws, or others that are high dexterity scaling. If you ever find weapons like Rivers of Blood, Antspur, Rapier, Eleanor's Pullblade, or Duvia, you can use them pretty effectively alongside the basic ranged playstyle. What do you guys make of the things I've said? Have you been playing the Nightreign DLC? What do you make of it so far? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you somewhere in the middle? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What do you want to see with Nightreign moving forward? We'll probably do another video about this at some point. Let me know in the comments below.